in our close reader, and we are going to be looking at three different inventors: Thomas Alva Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and George Washington Carver. And we're still thinking about that essential question of where ideas for inventions come from. And as we're listening, we're going to think about how to summarize each section that we read. So there's going to be an introduction and a conclusion, but then also three sections: Thomas Alva Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and George Washington Carver. So remember, when we're looking to summarize, we're thinking about the who, what, when, where, and why. So go ahead and take your close reader out, open to page 14, and follow along as we listen to this text.
Extended Read 1. Remember to annotate as you read.
Famous Inventors by Margaret McNamara. Introduction. An inventor is someone who creates something new. An inventor also finds new ways to do things. An inventor works to solve problems. Get ready to meet and read about three famous inventors. They were also scientists. Find out what they invented. Learn what problems they solved. See how their inventions changed the way people live every day.
Thomas Alva Edison. Alexander Graham Bell. George Washington Carver.
Thomas Alva Edison, 1847 to 1931. Thomas Alva Edison loved to read and to learn. He also loved to try to make new things. In 1869, he came up with his first big invention. He made improvements to a machine used by the stock market. His invention was so good that he was paid $40,000. That is like $1 million today. Edison decided to become a full-time inventor. That turned out to be good for the entire world.
On August 12, 1877, Edison invented the first phonograph.
Okay, so real quickly before we move on to that second page, I do want to talk about how this image here helps to clarify our understanding a little bit, because none of us have ever really heard of or seen a phonograph except for in our recent research about Thomas Edison. And so this gives us an idea of what it looks like, right? If we were introduced to that word phonograph and had no picture or caption to explain it, then we wouldn't really have a picture to make in our head of what that might look like. So that's how this image is going to help us better understand our text.
During his lifetime, Edison and his workers came up with more than 1,000 inventions. He is best known for inventing the first long-lasting electric light bulb. He also invented the phonograph. The first phonograph made recordings of people talking or singing. He invented the first movie camera, too. When you're up one night watching a movie or listening to music, think about Thomas Edison.
Edison tested the first successful incandescent lamp.
Okay, we're going to pause there. So that section is done about Thomas Edison. So let's go back. Our who is obviously Thomas Alva Edison. And he was an inventor, a full-time inventor. And this is our date range here of when he was born. In 1896, he came up with his first big invention. And he made a lot of money. It says that he was paid $40,000 But because of inflation, that is actually like getting $1 million today, which is kind of hard to understand, but money was worth more back then than it is now. So now we have more money than they did back then. So let's look at some of the things that he invented. Best known for inventing the first long-lasting light bulb, the phonograph, and the movie camera as well. Those were his big inventions. So who would be Thomas Alva Edison? In what would be, oh, too far. What would be that he was a full-time inventor? When, these are the dates, right? In 1869 was the first big invention. Where, I don't think it tells us in this one. And why. He was really curious, right? He was very interested in making improvements and learning how to make new things. I guess we could underline this here. That's why he ended up becoming an inventor, right? All right, very good. So we've summarized that one. The big points are Thomas Edison loved to make things. He created the long-lasting electric light bulb, phonograph, and movie camera. So now we're going to read about
Alexander Graham Bell, 1847 to 1922. Alexander Graham Bell had a lifelong interest in communication. He was also interested in the human voice. Bell's mother was deaf. His father was a speech teacher. In 1872, Bell began to tutor deaf children. He also worked to make a better telegraph. A telegraph sends and receives coded sound messages. The sounds were beeps and clicks. Each sound stood for a letter. A telegraph was the only way people could talk to each other from far away.
Bell experimented with the harmonic telegraph.
Wanted to invent a machine that would send and receive the human voice. He worked on his idea for years. In 1876, Bell showed the world the first telephone. People in different places could now hear one another's voices.
All right, so let's pause there. So this is the beginning of our second section, which is Alexander Graham Bell. And Alexander Graham Bell, let's see, let me grab my pen real quickly. So that's obviously our who. What is that he invented the telegraph, and he also invented the first telephone. Our when would be 1872 is when he invented the telegraph. So who, what, when, where, it doesn't tell us. But why? Well, here's one. He wanted to invent a machine that would send and receive the human voice. And his other why was that he had a lifelong interest in communication and was interested in the human voice. So that was really important to him. Nearly all of his inventions had to do with recording or hearing things about communicating. So if we went back to summarize, Alexander Graham Bell had a lifelong interest in communication and the human voice. In 1872, he made the telegraph. In 1876, he made the telephone because he wanted to invent a machine that would send and receive the human voice. So now we're going to learn about our third and final inventor for this passage, which is George Washington Carver, not George Washington the president. This is George Washington Carver, who was an inventor. So let's listen to learn about George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver, 1864 to 1943. George Washington Carver was an African American. He was born a slave in Missouri. Slavery ended in 1865. As Carver grew up, he loved to learn about plants. When he was old enough, Carver went to college. He was the first black student at Iowa State Agricultural College. He studied everything he could about plants.
Southern farmers grew only cotton.
After college, Carver became a teacher. He taught students and farmers about plants. Most farmers in the southern United States grew cotton. Carver wanted them to grow other plants as well. He knew that would help farmers make more money. He knew it would be good for the soil too. Carver taught farmers how to grow peanut plants. He taught them how to grow sweet potato plants too. He invented hundreds of new uses for peanuts and sweet potatoes. Because of Carver, farmers had better lives, and everyone benefited from his inventions.
Carver invented ways to make ink, soap, and glue from peanuts.
Okay, so let's go back again. George Washington Carver is our who. He studied everything he could about plants. And he wanted these farmers to grow other plants. He knew it would help them make more money, but also be good for the soil. So what did he do? What did he do? He taught farmers how to grow peanut plants and invented hundreds of new uses for peanuts and sweet potatoes. Okay, so if we go back to retell, George Washington Carver studied everything he could about plants. He wanted the southern farmers to grow other plants to help them make more money and because it was good for the soil. He taught them how to grow peanut plants and sweet potato plants and invented hundreds of new uses for peanuts and sweet potatoes, including ink, soap, and glue, all out of peanuts. Can you imagine? Okay, so this over here, this is really helpful for our summary of this text. It shows us our inventor and the important inventions that they created. So we have Thomas Edison, phonograph, light bulb, Alexander Graham Bell, telephone, George Washington Carver used peanuts and sweet potatoes to make ink and soap. Okay, so now let's look at our conclusion and wrap this text up.
Conclusion. Inventors create new things. They also work to solve problems. Some inventors make things that change the way people live. Other inventors find better ways to do things. The inventors in this book all change the world for the better.
Okay, so that kind of wraps up our whole text there, right? So we had 3 big sections about Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell, and George Washington Carver. But this conclusion here sums up the whole thing. Inventors work to solve problems and create new things, and they change the world for better, right? Those are the important things that we can take away from this. Thomas Edison improved our ability to work at nighttime because we have light bulbs now. And Alexander Graham Bell helped us to improve our communication. And George Washington Carver helped farmers and came up with new uses for things that could easily be grown. So all of them helped to create new things, solve problems, and change the world for to be a better place. So let's go ahead and underline that. Inventors create new things. They work to solve problems. Inventors in this book all change the world for better.